Like and subscribe to Pell's Fundamentals for more content like this. Sources linked below. Welcome, everyone. Today, we're bringing you our Faroese News Report. Think of it as a concise overview of recent developments, taken directly from the sources. Our mission is pretty straightforward, just to get you quickly up to speed on what's been happening lately in the Faroe Islands.
Exactly. And for this report, we're really sticking to the facts, just presenting what's come out in recent articles and official reports. We'll cover quite a range, economic numbers, some legal stuff, new ideas in tourism, and, well, some important social issues, too. It's all about giving you that direct, factual picture.
All right, sounds good. Let's dive into the first part then, the economic and financial landscape. What are the recent updates from the Faroese banks in the economy?
Okay, well, looking at May 2025, there was a pretty noticeable surge in Faroese bank deposits. The growth from Faroese customers, in Faroese banks specifically, was 9.9%. That's measured as a 3-month average.
Okay, 9.9%. What was behind that growth?
It seems to be driven by increases in both business deposits, they were up 11.2%, and household deposits, which rose 6.9%.
Right, so both contributing significantly.
Exactly. And overall, if you look at the deposit surplus, that's deposits minus loans across all Faroes financial institutions, including the foreign branches operating there, it stood at 2.5 billion DKK in May 2025.
2.5 billion surplus. Got it.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's deposits. What about the bank's own financial performance? How have they been doing?
Right. So looking at their performance, say, from 2023 to 2024. In 2023, pre-tax profits saw quite a big jump compared to previous years. That was mainly down to progress in their core operations.
Okay, so a strong 2023. What about into 2024?
Well, the increase from 2023 to 2024, the pre-tax profit growth, it was actually much smaller, just 2%.
Only 2%. That's quite a slowdown. Why was that?
Well, the core income itself, it grew by a decent 6%, but, and this is key, this growth was sort of held back by a really sharp increase in loan write-downs.
Loan write-downs. How much are we talking?
We're talking going from 2.2 million DKK in 2023 up to 27.7 million DKK in 2024. So that's, an increase of over 1,100%, more than tenfold?
Wow, okay. That's a huge jump. That would definitely impact the bottom line.
Absolutely. That, along with some exchange rate adjustments, really moderated that overall pre-tax profit growth, despite the decent core performance.
Right, I see. So core operations are doing okay, but those write-downs really put a damper on things. How does this all tie into the overall lending picture? Is lending growing?
Yeah, so total lending growth was 5.5% in May 2025. Interestingly, lending growth had actually been decreasing since early 2024, but it seems to have picked up slightly since the start of 2025.
Okay, 5.5% growth overall. What's the total amount?
Total loans to Faroese customers from Faroese banks reached 20.3 billion DKK in May 2025. That's up 1.3 billion DKK from May 2024.
And who's doing the borrowing? Is it across the board?
It seems to be, yeah. Households, municipalities, and businesses all increase their borrowing.
Can you give us a bit more detail on that breakdown?
Sure. So loans to households from Faroese banks, they went up by 700 million DKK. Now compare that to loans from Danish mortgage institutions to Faroese citizens. That figure stayed pretty stable, around 3.5 billion DKK in May 2025. Households borrow much more from Faroese banks, about 11.1 billion DKK there.
Okay, so mostly local bank lending for households. What about municipalities?
Municipal debt also increased. It went up by 114 million DKK between May 2024 and May 2025. That brings their total debt to nearly 1.8 billion DKK. Just for context, at the end of 2024, Tórshavn owed over 600 million of that, Klaksvik was nearly 500 million, and Runavík over 200 million.
Right, and businesses.
Business debt in Faroese financial institutions was almost 7 billion DKK in May 2025. That's about 400 million DKK more than the year before.
Okay, so summing that part up.
Well, while most bank loans still go to households and private businesses, what we've seen in recent years is a relative increase in borrowing by municipalities and public enterprises. And banks generally see these loans as lower risk.
Got it. That gives a really clear overview of the financial side. All right, let's shift gears now. What about updates from key industries and any major corporate news? Maybe start with the fishing sector.
Okay. So, the Ministry of Fisheries and Maritime Affairs recently put out 2 important documents. They're called the Ownership Overview 2025 and Fishing Rights 2025.
Ownership and rights. What's the purpose behind releasing these?
It's primarily about transparency. The idea is to make it really easy for anyone to see, which big groups or companies or even individuals own the fishing vessels in the Faroes fleet, and also how the fishing rights themselves are actually organized and handed out across the industry.
Okay, transparency. So what information is actually in these documents?
Well, the ownership overview does exactly what it says. It lays out who owns the vessels. The fishing rights document gives you the full picture on rights. It's broken down into 3 stages, basically. First, how rights are grouped, like is it by quota or fishing days? Second, which companies actually hold those rights for 2025? And third, which specific ships and boats those rights are tied to.
That sounds pretty comprehensive. Where can people find these?
They're available online. You can find them on the websites for both VERN, that's the Faroese Fisheries Agency, and the Ministry of Fisheries and Maritime Affairs.
Good to know, so anyone can access that information. Okay, moving from fishing to energy. What's the latest with Minesto, the Swedish tidal energy company working in the Faroes?
Right, Minesto. They're currently going through a streamlining process. The aim is to cut their fixed costs by about 35% compared to where they were when they started these changes roughly a year ago.
35% cut. How are they achieving that? What specific changes are happening?
They've made a few key moves. Their office in Wales has been closed, and all the admin functions are now centralized at their headquarters in Gothenburg, Sweden. The management team has also been trimmed down from 8 people to 6, and they've scaled back some research activities now and mainly focused on specific research for clients.
Okay. How many people are working there now?
The total staff count is currently 36 people, and their main operational focus now is definitely on Vestmanna here in the Faroes, working closely with their local partners.
So, consolidating and focusing on the Faroes operations. What's the outlook?
According to their CEO, Martin Edlund, he says Minesto is now well prepared for the next big step, which is building these dragon farms using their large tidal kites.
Okay, so streamlining for future growth, essentially. All right, let's broaden the scope now to other news items, things affecting daily life, legal matters, public interest stuff. What's first?
Well, there's a decision from the Ombudsman regarding a change to the Nordic double taxation agreement. He's decided not to take any further action on a complaint that was filed.
A complaint about the tax treaty. What was the issue?
The complaint came from an interest group and also a private citizen. They were arguing that the Minister of Finance announced a change to how double taxation relief is calculated, using a regulation akungara instead of passing a formal law, a log.
Okay, a procedural argument.
Yeah.
But what was the actual impact of the change itself?
The practical effect, which started January 1st, 2025, is that people working abroad will end up paying more tax in the Faroe Islands than they used to. The calculation method for relief changed.
So people pay more tax. And the Ombudsman's decision was?
His reasoning was that the ability to change the method was actually already approved by a parliamentary law beforehand. So the announcement through regulation was done with the proper authority, and it followed the correct legal procedure to make it official. He basically saw the regulation as just an informational notice implementing what was already legally possible, not something that needed a whole new law itself.
I see. So the mechanism was already in place legally.
Yeah.
Okay. Moving to some more difficult news now, there was a report of a serious accident.
Yes, unfortunately. SEV, the national power company, announced a tragic work accident that happened near Silitra. A man fell from an electricity pole while he was working.
Oh no, what was the outcome?
He was airlifted to the National Hospital by helicopter, but very sadly, he died from his injuries. SEV stated that the cause of the accident can't be determined until investigations are complete. And of course, the family has been notified.
That's terrible news. A very sad event. Okay, shifting again, there's been some public discussions sparked by a reader's letter, something about youth and housing.
Yes, quite a significant piece published by VP.O. It's a reader's letter written by a student named Milja Egilsnes Anlanda, and it raises some really serious concerns about the challenges facing young people in the Faroes today.
What's the main thrust of the letter? What's the core concern?
The central point is that many young Faroes people feel they can't move back home after studying or being away, mainly because of financial insecurity. She points to rising interest rates, incredibly high rent prices, and just a generally unaffordable housing market. The letter mentions, for example, that a small 60-square-meter apartment can cost more than what someone earns in a typical salary.
That sounds like it challenges the image many have of the Faroes.
It definitely does. The letter highlights this paradox, The Faroes are often called one of the world's richest countries per capita, but the feeling among many young people, according to the letter, is that this wealth is kind of only on paper. It's not translating into their everyday reality.
Does the letter provide any data or statistics to back this up.
Yes, it cites some quite stark figures. It claims nearly half of the young generation, maybe around 5,000 people, emigrates each year. It suggests that young people today are living under tougher conditions than those who were young just a decade ago. And it mentions that over 1,100 children are currently living at risk of poverty. The warning in the letter is that if this trend continues, it could seriously undermine the welfare system.
That's quite a warning. Does it talk about the impact beyond just finances, like the mental side?
Absolutely. It specifically brings up the mental burden. It references a survey called Husu Hovurtuda, which means, how are you doing? Indicating that about half of young people are struggling with depression and stress. And the letter directly links this stress to financial insecurity.
And does the writer offer any critique of current policies or priorities?
Yes, there's a strong critique. It questions why billions are being invested in what the letter calls luxury concrete projects, perhaps referring to large infrastructure projects, while things like social welfare, building affordable student housing, and general public housing construction seem neglected. The argument is that this creates a situation where the benefits of the country's shared resources aren't reaching many people who struggle to access basics like affordable housing, timely doctor's appointments, daycare spots, or even reasonably priced food.
So given these concerns and critiques, what solutions or actions does the letter call for?
It lays out several calls to action aimed at decision makers. First, a general plea to prioritize people. More specifically, it calls for revising the mandates or operations of Bustagir and Husalansgrunnerin. Those are the public housing and housing loan fund bodies. The goal would be to make them provide dignified and genuinely affordable housing for students, young people, and families. It also suggests regulating the rental market to stop landlords charging very high rents for potentially substandard or unhealthy living conditions.
Okay, housing is clearly a major focus. Anything else?
Yes, it also calls for building more public housing across all the islands, not just concentrated in certain areas. It suggests taxing property speculators to cool the market and ensuring there's interest support available to prevent people falling into poverty due to housing costs. Finally, it calls for accessible mental health support without long waiting lists.
It's a comprehensive list of demands. What's the overall takeaway message?
The core message is really that young people want a future in the Faroe Islands. They want to stay and contribute, but they need real access to the housing market and the benefits of society to be able to do that. It ends with a pretty powerful line, "We are not postcards, we are people."
A very strong and important perspective being voiced there. Okay, for our final segment, let's look at something different, an innovation in tourism. What's this about self-navigating cars?
Right. This is a new initiative launched by Visit Faroe Islands. It's called Self-Navigating Cars. The main idea is to kind of shake up the usual tourist trails, get people off the beaten path, and give them some new, maybe unexpected experiences. They do this by encouraging tourists to drive, well, without knowing exactly where they're going next.
Drive without knowing the destination.
Yeah.
That sounds intriguing. Is there a reason why they're trying this now?
Yeah, there's some global context here. A McKinsey report from 2024 pointed out that something like 80% of tourists worldwide end up visiting only about 10% of the most famous destinations.
Wow, 80-10.
Exactly. And this is often driven by, social media trends, algorithms suggesting the same places over and over. It leads to very similar travel experiences for everyone and puts a lot of pressure on those few popular spots.
And the Faroes have been seeing that kind of pressure too.
Yes, definitely. Some of the really well-known spots, Mullafossur Waterfall, the lighthouse on Kalsoy, Itin Akolenum, Trelenipa Cliff, the village of Trunavik, they've experienced growing visitor numbers and the pressure that comes with it, especially in summer.
Okay, so these self-navigating cars are the proposed solution. How do they actually work?
Well, they've designed 30 special routes. These routes deliberately highlight places that are less famous, but, equally beautiful and unique, spread across the country. The system was developed with a local company, 62N Car Rental. When tourists rent one of these cars, they basically agree to follow the car's GPS instructions without knowing the full route beforehand.
So you just follow the screen.
Pretty much. You activate it with a QR code, and then the GPS guides you on a special route with these unexpected stops planned throughout the day. Each tour typically lasts between 3 and 6 hours and includes maybe 4 to 6 interesting locations. But here's the twist. It only reveals one location at a time.
Ah, okay, so it maintains the surprise element.
Exactly. And the system also shares little stories and bits of local knowledge along the way. A key feature is that no two travelers get the exact same route at the same time, so it helps spread people out and keeps the experience unique.
That sounds quite sophisticated. Who created these routes?
They were put together based on local knowledge created by Faroese people, really aiming for that authentic feel. Technologically, it's built on Google Maps, it's free to use with the rental, and accessible for any of their rental cars. It sort of builds on Visit Faroe Islands' earlier projects, like the famous Google Sheet View.
Right, I remember that. When are these cars available?
They started being available for rent on July 8th, and the price is the same as their other standard rental cars.
Okay, and what are the hopes for this initiative? What do they want to achieve?
The main hopes are, firstly, that tourists will really embrace this chance for a more varied and serendipitous kind of travel experience. And secondly, that it will genuinely help ease the pressure on those few very popular spots during the peak summer season by distributing visitors more evenly. Apparently, Forbes magazine has already picked up on it and shown some interest, so it's getting attention. And the tours cover locations not just in the Central Islands, but also down in Suðuroy.
Sounds like a really creative approach to sustainable tourism. Well, that covers our Faroese News Report for today. Lots of developments across different sectors. Like and subscribe to Paul's Fundamentals for more content like this, sources linked below.